From the age 15, in my teenage bedroom, they were the band. It's difficult to explain why. Something about their sense of despair and gloom on a gothic, almost classical scale made Joy Division the ultimate rock group for a miserable teenager finding his way. This starts with a fantastic bass sound of Peter Hook. This is digital. Let's have just a minute of this, and then we'll talk about the band. The singer there, day in, day out, is Ian Curtis. As suddenly as I discovered them, it was over. Ian Curtis hanged himself, and the rest of the band formed New Order, and they went on to bigger things, different things. Ian had arguably left plenty of clues about his state of mind in his lyrics. They were melancholy and morbid. They dripped with disaffection. After his suicide, they sounded darker still. This was not just the normal nihilism of the young, but a mind in utter turmoil. I feel it closing in. I feel it closing in, as you just heard. Can I go on with this train of defense, disturbing and purging my mind, he sang. I'm ashamed of the person I am. His bandmates have since said they didn't pay too much attention to Ian's lyrics. In fact, they often couldn't hear them over the roar of their guitars. What's more, after every epileptic fit or bout of self-harming that Ian endured, he would assure them that he was okay, he was getting it together, he just wanted to carry on as normal. Even after his first failed suicide attempt, he turned up for a gig the very next day. That hasn't stopped Peter Hook, the band's bassist, from feeling a sense of guilt about Ian Curtis's death, from questioning whether he could have done anything to prevent it. Even after all these years, he says Ian's suicide is something he thinks about every day. And Peter has written his own account of his time in the band called Unknown Pleasures Inside Joy Division, which he says is as much about Ian as it is about him. Thank you so much for coming in.
You're welcome, Max. Pleasure.
And actually hearing digital, I hear that sound of your bass guitar is quite a famous sound in music. Because you had it, we were just talking about you've got problems with your back. You had the longest guitar strap in rock history, didn't you?
Yes, as an avid gig goer, I went to see The Clash. And I was looking at Paul Simonon, and I thought, my God, that guy looks the business. And I just figured out that it was just the length of his strap and his gait, and became a great fan. And my sort of peak was when I was using two Japanese guitar straps joined together to get me the correct length.
So now today you've hurt your back lifting a flower pot.
I have hurt my back lifting a flower pot. My wife, yes.
That's rock and roll. But it's the fact that, of course, if you play your guitar and you have your guitar down by your knees, it's going to hurt at some point, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I suffered from it. It started in about 1993. I got a roundness of my discs, which gave me great pain. But as long as I exercise, which is a nice thing, I'm okay. I wouldn't recommend it at home, though, of course.
To take you right back to the Unknown Pleasures and the book and the story. I mean, it's a lot about you and the tough times that you had as a child, actually. But then you encounter Ian Curtis and the band comes together. And just tell us about how you found him in those early days.
The strangest thing doing the book was realising the sequence of events that if I hadn't have gone to see the Sex Pistols and walked out of the Sex Pistols gig at the Leicester Free Trade Hall of Musician, it does make me wonder if I'd missed it, what I would have done, or whether I'd have missed that opportunity. Because it was the strangest thing in the world, because it wasn't really about music, it was about attitude, completely about attitude. What I loved about Johnny Rotten was the destructive, nihilistic way he looked at everything. And because as a teenager, I suppose in the way that you feel confused, you don't know what to do with your life, a bit frustrated, a bit isolated, that seemed perfect, that sort of expression, that outlet of anger. And it was only afterwards, of course, when Bernard and I were sat there a few days afterwards thinking, we better use these guitars for something. That you sort of thinking, oh God, I wish I'd have paid attention at school.
You mentioned that gig at the lesser free trade hall. There's so many people who went or say they went to those gigs and they inspired them. It's become absolutely vital moment in the history of music.
Yeah, especially in Manchester. Yeah. I mean, the first one there was about 40 people, if that, and everybody was completely puzzled, confused, and absolutely blown away by the Sex Pistols because it was just so unlike anything you'd ever seen before. And it's very hard to explain. It seems ridiculous now, even to me, that I've been a musician for 34 years, to think that I would have gone in there a non-musician and walked out a musician, and then it becoming your whole life, you know, and the whole pattern for your whole life was dictated on that night. Very strange.
And you describe a situation where it's very vivid in your book. You're almost thinking, am I going to get out of this alive? They were actually very unsafe, those gigs.
It was frightening, yeah. I mean, once we started playing, there was many occasions when you wondered whether you were going to get out alive, to say the least. I mean, the whole pogoing, the aggression, especially the way it attracted, once the Sex Pistols burst via Bill Grundy, and they came out, and the way people came looking for trouble, and it was much less controlled, much less secure in those days, and you literally were fighting for your life because everybody was judging you. You didn't have a record out or anything, so it was very much your performance on the night that dictated whether they loved or hated you.
You describe how the band, Joy Division, come together, and both musically and almost as friends as well. And I mean, Ian Curtis, for me as a fan, is all doom and gloom, but actually he was one of the lads to some extent with you guys.
He was definitely a very, very nice, very generous, very open man, and you made a connection with him straight away. And I must admit that meeting him and talking to him the way we did at the third Sex Pistols gig, when he turned round and he had hate written on his back, that was just unbelievable for me, because after talking to him, if somebody had said to you, "What's he got written on his back?" you would not have said hate, because he was such a lovely guy.
And you had this situation where he had, what was it, a drummer and a guitarist, and you had a drummer. So the rules of punk say you can't form a band, you've got to get a great drummer.
Yes, and we waited. I suppose it was odd, really, because I suppose the whole thing was about belonging, and you belonged to punk, and you were quite patient then, because it seemed to be going quite well. Bernard and I were progressing, we were playing, learning our instruments, meeting people and talking about what you were going to do all the time. And you were happy with that. So when Ian came along, and we couldn't have him, if you like, it was okay. And we just waited a little bit longer, and then we got him, and then literally no audition. We never even asked to look at his lyrics, you just took it for granted that you felt together, and you did feel together, and that was it. It was as simple as that. Amazing bit of chemistry.
And for those who aren't 47 or aren't obsessed with that particular period, you were post-punk, really, weren't you? So the punk thing, the Damned and the Clash, and people being thrown, spitting and mic stands, all that. You came in with a slightly more thoughtful sound.
Well,
that fair comment?
The sound evolved to a thoughtful sound. I mean, at the time we were aping the Sex Pistols, the Clash, and the Damned. Our early stuff was a bit early, shall we say. What happened was that the chemistry between us was so good that your music actually evolved as you're playing, and as you got more practiced, started to think about it more. It actually came very, very effortless, very easy, and the material progressed from punk to the sound of Joy Division quite quickly.
And part of that, of course, the lyrics of Ian Curtis. I just played just a brief burst of some of the songs. One is called Atrocity Exhibition, happy song, then Passover, and then Isolation. So just about 45 seconds now.
And I go on with this phrase, serving, encouraging my time. Back out of my duties when all said and done. I know that I'll lose every time. Other than I can believe me. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm ashamed of the things I've been looking. I'm ashamed of the person I am.
The three songs, and they're all very, very dark lyrics. I don't think he ever wrote a happy song, did he?
Well, sometimes you think Love Will Tear Us Apart is a happy song, but then when you look at the lyrics, you realise there's bitter and twisted as the rest, I suppose you'd have to say.
Well, his
lyrics, I never viewed them as unhappy. I just viewed them as such wonderful statements and a wonderful way of looking at the world. It never struck me that when people used to say we were doomy and gloomy, because it never, ever struck me. Whenever we played, it always felt like such an outburst of a celebration, really, of our music. I never got that feeling. It was, that was one of the myths that people put on you, and then they started to reflect on you. People thought you were like that, and I think that's one of the things about the book that I was aware of, was that you were dispelling a few images and pricking a few balloons that people may have had.
So he was having fun with the band.
Oh God, we were all so focused and so intent on making it a success. The hard work that you put in was so hard that really you needed the end goal. And it was never about money, which was the wonderful thing. I was doing a talk last night in Sheffield, and I actually realised that up until, God, the taxman got me. I never even knew how much we got a gig. I never thought to ask. So yeah, it was all about playing your music to people and that wonderful release that you got from having people hear you and sort of dig what you were doing.
It's embarrassing to say, but in my study at home, the biggest picture on the wall is of you lot in about 1978, standing there.
There's nothing embarrassing about having a picture of you in my hall.
I know that's not true.
It's on my dartboard. I'm joking.
We got these different pictures of Ian Curtis. There's your friend Ian Curtis. There's the gigging Ian Curtis who's having fun, but also he did have epileptic fits. He was unwell, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think in my mind I'd sort of put that to the end of Joy Division, and it actually did surprise me when I came to do the book and I did the timeline to see how early he became ill, because I think to make me feel better, in my mind I'd put it back, he got ill towards the end, but he was ill and he suffered with it, and we tried to do as much as we could with, but the greatest, our greatest foe in it was Ian, because Ian would not give in to it. He definitely didn't want to let you down. I think he felt that he didn't want to let himself down, and he fought it tooth and nail. He really did, and as the things stacked up against him, again, when you look at it in the book and you see it in a timeline, it's quite easy to go with hindsight and go, oh my God, this was getting very, very difficult. But while you were there at the time, it didn't feel like that. We all felt we were doing our best.
The lyrics look now like a suicide note, day in, day out. I feel
that particular one, though, was written right at the start. Before it was our first song that we used to join Factory, you see. So there is a contradiction in the timing when you look at the lyrics. Peter Saville, our designer, always says that maybe if we'd have sat down and studied them, we would have been able to help him more. But the thing was is that there wasn't that aura. And there wasn't that aura around him. You weren't wheeling him in a wheelchair. He was walking in quite confident, quite happy most of the time. It was only when the illness took him that you started to have to look after him. And even then he'd snap out of it and come back. Many's the time I took him to the hospital after a gig, and he'd be back and then back in the bar. So it was a very confusing situation to be in. And we were only 21, 22, so we weren't very well versed, and people didn't have the knowledge or the confidence in themselves, I think, that people have these days. It's a completely different world.
That's what's so sad in a way. He would have had treatment now, wouldn't he?
It would have, well, I think the thing is that now, my God, if it was One Direction or something, the guy would be looked after and you would stop the band and you would make sure that he was all right. But then it felt okay for us to do the two together, which now is hard to understand.
But it also means that the music is so real and so raw. So I'm just going to play Love Will Tear Us Apart. The only time I've ever thrown a radio across the room, I think I was 18, I was listening to Radio 1, and the Muppet on it said, and now One Hit Wonders, Joy Division, and they played this song, and I thought, no, there's a little bit more to it than that. But this is a pop song. We play it the whole time, but it's also, it is at the heart of Joy Division's sound, this song, isn't it? Just tell us about it before we play it.
It's a love song that Ian wrote, I think, and I can only pontificate about this, is that when things were getting difficult. And it's a very peculiar song because, as Peter Saville is again quoting a lot, Pete, today, I'm meeting him tonight, you see, on my mind. He said that this was the start for Joy Division because they had a pop song and it was going to cross over, which Love Will Tear Us Apart did. Unfortunately, crossed over after Ian had died, and it was released after his death. So in a way, the guy on Radio 1 was right. Joy Division were a one-hit wonder.